600 square kilometer expanse in Hanxiang City, which is known as China's Charm City and is home to 3.7 million people. This collection of sinkholes varies in size, with 31 average-sized sinkholes and 17 that are considered to be large by most standards. One, however, is being dubbed as a super large sinkhole, dropping 320 meters into the Earth's crust and having a diameter of 520 meters. That makes this enormous sinkhole an interesting, but still incredibly dangerous discovery. The Hanxiang sinkholes formed very recently, in the last 2 years, with research currently underway to determine whether or not this is a serious problem that should be addressed sooner rather than later. So far, the government is keeping a close eye on the situation, but doesn't yet feel that the sinkholes warrant immediate and urgent attention, opting to focus on other, more pressing matters. At the moment, they've stated that the sinkholes are a rare and impressive sight that they feel could boost tourism in the area, which is currently their main priority. It seems to be going well for them so far, with projections suggesting that there is keen international interest in the sinkholes, with many extreme athletes and hobbyists already beginning to flock to the sites. The dangers that these sinkholes pose have already claimed the lives of numerous people in China in recent years, and we hope that all this attention doesn't lead to more in the future. But the world is seeing a worrying trend, with sinkholes popping up all over the place, many times without warning. The surrounding area has also seen a lot of action, with the discovery of the world's largest sinkhole, located in the South China Sea, making headlines not too long before the Shaanxi province sinkholes were found. If this trend is allowed to continue, then Hanxiang City may end up being less charmed than their tourism board has led us to believe, and we hope that those living there don't disappear into another enormous sinkhole anytime soon. Number 4. Wink, Texas. Sinkholes are also becoming more of a concern for US residents nowadays, with Wink, Texas being another hotspot for sinkhole activity. They've been making themselves known since the 80s and are made even more dangerous by the fact that nobody actually knows exactly what's causing them or why. This would be troubling enough if recently studies hadn't also shown that these holes are now growing in size, threatening to swallow up more of the Earth as they expand. Locals are convinced that oil and gas companies engaging in drilling operations are to blame for this growing trend, but the state doesn't seem to be willing to take those concerns seriously so far. There's even evidence to suggest that 2 of the larger sinkholes that are already present in the area are showing signs of becoming one supermassive sinkhole. We don't know about you, but that sounds like a sign of the coming apocalypse to us. People are still living in the area and say they've just gotten used to these sorts of things, which is even more alarming than Venetians being okay with low-level flooding during their workday. We can understand how a few feet of water would get in the way of your day-to-day, but that's not nearly as fatal as an enormous hole opening up under your feet with everything collapsing into it. The good news is that science and technology has advanced since the 80s, which means that residents of Wink have a little less to worry about, but even modern prediction methods and safety procedures can fail us. Furthermore, even with sufficient warning to evacuate, sinkholes don't care where they show up, oftentimes leading to loss of property and a lot of damage. Just think about how much your life would be turned upside down if your house was one day replaced with a giant hole. That would seriously suck and end up leaving you absolutely screwed, even with proper insurance. That threat is basically looming over those living in Wink every single day, and we have to applaud them for putting up with that level of uncertainty, especially now that their neighborhood eyesores are actually expanding right now. That makes those who remain there either stupid or crazy or both, at least as far as we're concerned. Number 3. Solikamsk 2, Russia. One look at any recent photo of the Solikamsk 2 mining community will tell you that something seriously dark went down there. The bleak and barren landscape aside, there's an enormous sinkhole in the middle of a city located not far from the nearby salt mine. While the government is remaining pretty tight-lipped about the entire incident, which is to be expected, it seems that the mine flooded, which degraded the surrounding earth around it enough to cause it to simply give out. Scientists have also pointed to an earthquake that occurred in 1994, which certainly didn't do the area any favors. These 2 events were all that it took to create the massive sinkhole. Measuring up to 40 meters across, the hole is situated directly in the middle of a neighborhood, with houses located on either side. A number of those houses are incredibly close to the edges of the sinkhole, and while it's not been confirmed by authorities, it looks like there must have been houses sitting directly on top of what is now just empty space. This helps to hammer home just how worried people should be about the dangers concerning sinkholes, and we hope that nobody was in the houses that were there. The flood and previous earthquake, it's been discovered, were almost definitely caused by the proximity of the salt mine, with these types of natural disasters being relatively common at such locations. The Solikamsk 2 salt mine employs 1,300 workers and instructed all of them to remain at home after the incident, although another look at that pic makes us wonder how wise that suggestion was. What's clear is that this disaster wasn't nearly as fatal as the mine collapsing back in 1995, leading to an enormous natural gas explosion. This community seems to have seen more than its fair share of hardship, with this house-swallowing hole just being another crappy day in a thoroughly dangerous place to live. If you or anyone you know is able to shed some light on any official response from the Russian government with regard to this sinkhole, we invite you to share it in the comments below, as their silence, while fairly standard, is unsettling, and we'd like to make sure everyone made it out alive for our own peace of mind. Number 2. Rio Camoy Cave, Puerto Rico. You may have heard about the Rio Camoy Cave before now, as it's one of Puerto Rico's most popular attractions. It's a massive cave system that was carved out by the third largest underground river in the entire world. First discovered in 1958, the caves contain numerous sinkholes that dot the cave and surrounding area. While we've known about the caves since '58, evidence has shown that indigenous Puerto Ricans, the Taino, beat us to it by hundreds of years, although they were never sufficiently mapped back then. Only part of the total 268 acres of the park containing the cave system are open to the public because of the dangers involved, but those that you can get to are no less incredible. Much of it also remains unmapped, with only around 20 of an estimated 800 caves discovered so far. Some highlights include the Spiral Cave, which descends 205 steps into the earth before opening up into a massive sinkhole, which requires a special permit to explore further. The sinkhole itself provides access to the Rio Camoy, making it quite spectacular for those who are able to secure permission to venture that far. Many more sinkholes are kept off the beaten path, but the Tri-Town Sinkhole, or Sumedro Tres Pueblos, can be viewed from 3 special observation towers constructed specifically for that purpose. The sinkhole spans around 650 feet all the way across, and is located at the intersection of 3 neighboring towns, hence the name. Each of the 3 towns also owns and maintains one of the 3 towers, making the site a truly collaborative process. The sinkhole descends a good 400 feet into the earth, and the Camoy River can be seen flowing at its base, making the observation towers a wildly popular sight. What sets this sinkhole apart from the many others that seem to be cropping up all over the place these days is that these have been around for ages and were formed by entirely natural processes, which is the way things should be. We're not saying that they're any less dangerous, but at least we're not to blame, which has been a rare silver lining in recent years. Number 1. IHOP troubles. When all you want is pancakes, IHOP is a solid choice if you have one nearby. A staple of drunks and sugarholics alike, many people assume that a rough day at an IHOP involves popping a button or two. These customers got a little more than they bargained for at this IHOP location when the adjoining parking lot swallowed their cars whole. The sinkhole ended up around 50 feet wide at its widest point and spanned almost the entire length of the parking lot, which added up to a whopping 600 feet. Customers and staff said that the rupture in the earth followed a number of what sounded like a series of loud, muffled explosions before the power suddenly cut. They all thought they were caught in an earthquake right off the bat, but eventually learned that while they were safe, their vehicles weren't going anywhere anytime soon. Nobody was hurt, but over a dozen cars were swallowed up during the incident, which left those involved understandably feeling quite shaken. While this does look like a sinkhole and has been described like one, we felt we should mention that it's not technically a sinkhole, scientifically speaking, but that makes it no less impressive. The area had seen a ton of rain in the days leading up to the incident, which basically simulated the same conditions as what we'd expect from a sinkhole. Sinkholes are generally caused when an aquifer, or underwater reservoir, dries up, leaving nothing but empty space under the Earth's surface. In this case, The heavy rain ended up washing out the soil beneath the parking lot, leaving a hole underneath. With all this space, the asphalt slowly crumbled, with the extra weight of all those vehicles finally causing it to completely collapse. We don't know what the investigators discovered afterward, but we have to assume that the area wasn't developed properly underneath the parking lot. But we're pleased to see that they didn't skimp on the foundations of the actual building, or things could have ended up being much more tragic than they did. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. The forest can be a wonderful place to get back in touch with nature. With their serene beauty, forests inspire thoughts of relaxation. For all their benefits, however, forests can still be daunting places. Once the sun goes down, this can turn into a general foreboding, with danger seemingly lurking around every corner. Artists everywhere, including writers and producers, love engaging yet terrifying forest scenes. With so much space to hide, forests are a perfect haven for criminals and weirdos. From the psychopath to the hermit, forests are a good place to disappear if you don't want to be found. This adds a certain level of creepiness. Furthermore, there have been some very strange things found in forests that only add to their mystery. To help clear things up, we've compiled a list of the 5 strangest things found in the forest. Let's begin. Number 5. Mystery Sphere. Dr. Samir Osmanagic believes that a series of immense iron balls dotting the landscape around Bosnia in Eastern Europe could be some of the oldest made by humans. If his claim is true, then one of the greatest archaeological finds in recent history could be sitting undisturbed in the unassuming landscape of Bosnia. These immense boulders, supposedly carved by human hands around 1500 years ago, are, according to Osmanagic, evidence that the area conceals a long-forgotten civilization that included underground tunnels serving to connect a number of pyramids. While this far-fetched claim begins to touch on the absurd by the time we get to talk of pyramids, the balls are still no less intriguing. They were found to contain an extremely high iron content, much more than anything found in the surrounding landscape, and seem to have been carved by humans a very long time ago. Other than that, not much is known about these strange spheres. It's said that there used to be many more of them dotting the countryside, hundreds even. Almost all of these have now been destroyed after stories spread to locals suggesting they contained gold. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case, and now there are much less of the strange objects left to study. We can't fault them for it, but perhaps if we had more to study, we could come to some kind of consensus. The country also suffered through being on the front line of some incredibly intense and brutal wars and engagements throughout recent history, which could also account for the destruction of these fascinating objects. While many doubt Osmanagic's wild and admittedly ludicrous claims of massive and ancient cities gazing out across an expanse of pyramids in Bosnia's past, archaeologists across the globe can all agree that they're definitely worth looking into for their seeming historical significance. Anthropologists in the area have also been eager to posit theories regarding the sphere's creators, with many claiming them to be a lost tribe of nomads who accidentally found themselves lost far from home, but none have any real supporting evidence as of yet. Opposition to the near-complete agreement that these are man-made has even been stated, with some concrete evidence to back it up, in a manner of speaking. It turns out that the process of, you guessed it, concretion was given as evidence and holds a surprising amount of weight. Not that these massive boulders need any more of that. Even though the origins of these stones remains hotly debated, they are a magnificent sight and do look very man-made. Number 4. Nazi tree formations. This group of trees lay completely forgotten about in Zernikow until 1992, when aerial photographs accidentally captured the spectacle. The swastika has a long history that predated the Nazis by centuries. It was originally used by ancient Indians, among many other cultures, and symbolized prosperity in their culture. It became an image of evil and hatred after it was adopted by Hitler's Nazi party when he took control of Germany and began his murderous campaign of terror. Apparently, someone was a fan of his in the area and took it upon themselves to plant these trees designed to display 2 enormous swastikas every year when the seasons change. Given the history involved, that's an incredibly creepy discovery. After Germany's fall, it's remarkable that this went unnoticed by the world for so long. Even more disturbing is that it took numerous attempts to clear the forest and remove the stain from the landscape. After these unsuccessful attempts, with the forest growing back each time, the government finally removed only a portion of the trees in order to obscure the swastika. Their attempts were still fruitless for the most part, with the sign still being relatively visible. The trees even give a date under the 2 symbols, making it clear that a lot of work was put into this. The date even gives it the feel of a memorial, which certainly sends chills up our spines when we think about it. Amazingly, this is not the only time a forest has been branded in this way. Nazi supporters really were a band of raving lunatics, and these displays prove as much. It also goes to show that these people had far too much time on their hands. If they'd spent less time uprooting trees to make shapes and spent more getting to work, then maybe Germany wouldn't have been in such a rough spot to begin with. Forests across the area show similar color-changing features, with another notable site located in Kyrgyzstan at the base of the Himalayas. Many have suggested that these were projects constructed by the Hitler Youth, but evidence shows that it was probably just a few nutjobs wasting time while being terrible human beings to boot. Number 3. Real-life Mowgli. This girl is hailed as a modern-day Jungle Book character. Her upbringing certainly was, at the very least, unconventional. It's surprising that this item didn't make more waves around the world, as its implications are pretty astounding. It turns out that a young girl in India was found to be living in Katerniyagat Forest and Wildlife Sanctuary, existing as part of a tribe of monkeys. While the boy in Rudyard Kipling's classic tale was instead raised by wolves, the similarities are uncanny. It seems like the child was abandoned by her human parents only to be found by the troop, which quickly adopted her. The girl was rescued, as officials like to say, by police after being spotted by concerned citizens. The police, however, had to launch multiple attempts to bring the girl in because every time they approached, the monkeys would attack the police in order to protect her. Even more incredible is that she appeared to be carefree and unconcerned about her supposed predicament. She was also found to be relatively healthy. When first discovered by woodcutters, the girl apparently screeched at them like a monkey and resisted all attempts to coax her back to civilization. Originally determined to be between 8 and 12 years old, nobody is sure how long she actually spent under the care of the troop. Given her aggressive nature and complete assimilation into the monkey society, it was assumed that she was probably raised from a young child. Experts have agreed that she probably had sustained human contact before she joined the troop, with many claiming that she probably hadn't been there too long and was only recently abandoned. Signs of mental illness could be a clue as to why she was abandoned, but while she is currently toilet trained, she still can't speak. Hopefully she will, in time, be able to recount her unique and strange tale. Number 2. Crooked Forest. The trees in this forest make for surprisingly nice chairs, but do lend the place an atmosphere that suggests hooded figures wielding axes, intent on efficiently removing your limbs in no particular order. Even so, there's a haunting beauty to the place. Furthermore, nobody knows what happened to the trees here. One would be mysterious enough, but to be surrounded by strange, sea-stumped trees in such abundance is even more so. This 80-year-old forest is most definitely strange. It seems that some event during the early formation of this forest damaged the tips and some side branches of sprouting trees, but nothing is really known for certain. There is other evidence that points toward these 22 rows of almost identical trees being planted in order to farm later for specialized parts. This process, which produces compass timbers, could be the reason for these deformities and used to be routine when it came to shipbuilding and other industries. What makes this explanation so puzzling would be that someone started a large-scale project only to abandon it relatively quickly. Even more strange is that no news is spread of anyone taking on such a project in the area. Some of this mystery is due to the fact that local inhabitants aren't all that local after all. The nearby town of Grafino was completely razed during World War II and wasn't resettled until the 1970s. This aptly explains why nobody knows the true origin of the Crooked Forest. One final theory posits that a natural disaster, potentially a freak winter storm, knocked the entire forest over. If this is the case, it's a testament to the resilience of these incredible and strange trees. We'll probably never know the real reason behind the awkwardly shaped trees, but we'll definitely not want for outlandish theories in the years to come. Number 1. Amazon Glyphs. These glyphs, discovered in the Amazon, cover a fairly wide expanse of territory. Over 450 have been discovered, and some are absolutely enormous. This discovery is an odd one because we've previously thought that the Amazon was too dense for humans to have undertaken large-scale removal of trees to carve out immense settlements and spaces. If proven to be true, this could throw into question everything we know about the civilizations that used to occupy the area. The most important change would be with regard to how we view their engineering capabilities. These projects would have taken a massive amount of labor, preparation, and cost to complete. We know that these civilizations were quite advanced, but this suggests they were incredibly skilled at altering their landscape on an unprecedented scale. The glyphs reach a good 13 feet deep and represent a number of geometric shapes and some that are more abstract. Anthropologists have determined that these sites were probably ancient meeting places, potentially used for spiritual or religious purposes. Not much evidence has been found to suggest that they were used often. This points towards them being used infrequently. The area also shows extensive cultivation was carried out here, with huge swaths of the forest being cut back to suit the growing communities. Previous data made it look like these advancements were made much more recently, which gave us a misguided sense of what these people were capable of. Even though these glyphs have revealed so much interesting information that will no doubt employ archaeologists and anthropologists for a few decades, they still don't explain much of it at all. Experts are still just as stumped as they first were as to what these formations were actually used for or how they were constructed. Further investigation is currently ongoing with the hope of shedding light on some of the more strange aspects of these amazing glyphs. The fact that so little evidence of actual human habitation has been found so far hampered progress and presents some very real issues when it comes to narrowing things down. We've got our fingers crossed that they were made by an as yet unknown advanced tribe of the Amazon. Only time will tell when it comes to these incredibly strange and mysterious forests scattered across the globe. And there, you have 5 strangest things found in the forest. These strange places just go to show that some fascinating things can be found if you dare to venture far enough. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like and share it, and if you haven't already, subscribe down below to get notified every single day with new videos from Top 5's finest. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we are out. When many people think of football, they don't picture big hits or serious injuries, but the fact remains that football, like all sports, does have very real dangers. Most of these injuries are due to mistakes, with the vast majority not being due to any malicious moves. Still, these 5 football players who nearly passed away on the field were lucky enough that things didn't end up being much worse. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Petr Cech. When the ball's in front of the goal, things can get hectic really quickly and without any warning. Goalies are constantly being bumped and bruised, with many taking multiple kicks straight to the face as they attempt to make a save and gain control of the situation. Even though they're the only players to be able to use their hands, with the exception of free throws of course, you might think that they're able to keep their hands up for long enough to deflect some of the more major blows, but sometimes mistakes do happen. Petr Cech of the Czech Republic was playing in a match back in 2006 when he ran out to pick up a ball that was located a fair distance from the net and off to the side. Looking to score or at least make a centering kick, midfielder Stephen Hunt maintained his speed as he tried to catch up to the ball and keep it out of the challenging goalkeeper's hands. Petr dove for the ball, reaching it ahead of Hunt, who unfortunately wasn't able to stop himself in time and careened headlong into Petr, who was focused on the ball instead of his skull. What happened next must have hurt pretty bad. Hunt was shaken, but it turns out that his knee had connected with the side of Petr's skull, which was immediately fractured quite badly. He was immediately rushed to the hospital, where surgeons performed emergency brain surgery, only barely managing to save his life. Doctors told him afterward that 2 large pieces of his skull were actually floating loose and had been pushed into his brain, stating that he almost certainly would have died if they'd been even a sliver deeper. Despite his massive injuries, Petr was only out for 3 months before getting back to work and was starting shortly afterward. He says that his ordeal was eye-opening and that he's always made sure to wear a head guard to help prevent accidents like this from ever happening again. We think that's pretty brave of him and doubt we'd be able to get back to the game so quickly, if at all, after such a horrific injury that could have been so much worse. Petr's legacy is pretty impressive when all's said and done, with many of his Chelsea supporters still having room to cheer for him, even after his move to Arsenal, one of Chelsea FC's biggest rivals in the Premier League. Number 4. Masato Kudo. This Japanese footballer had just started up with the Vancouver Whitecaps, one of North America's Major League Soccer teams. The MLS is picking up steam, and many people who otherwise wouldn't be interested in football are slowly coming around to the sport and its finer points. Kudo only played 1 season with the Whitecaps, which ended with a less than impressive outcome. To begin with, he didn't really perform as expected, with his other issue being a violent on-field collision with Chicago Fire goalkeeper Matt Lampson. He was chasing after the ball after it was booted to the right of his opponent's goal. Lampson got to the ball first, and it looks like he tried to avoid a collision, with Kudo having too much momentum to stop himself. The two collided, with Lampson getting knocked in the side and Kudo taking a massive blow to his face, leaving him bleeding from his mouth and knocking him out instantly. Other players on both teams immediately rush over to help him, putting him in the recovery position and trying to ensure that he doesn't choke while he's out. Medics finally arrive, immediately getting down to assess the situation and give Kudo some much needed medical attention. The hit was so powerful that he actually broke his jaw and literally was swallowing his tongue. The opposing players who were first to reach him definitely helped him out then by stabilizing his neck and trying to get him on his side, as he very easily could have died with his injuries. Amazingly, Kudo wasn't on the sidelines for too long after his brush with death and was even awake and able to respond to hospital staff by the time he arrived, meaning he's got some serious pain tolerance and is able to take a huge hit only to bounce back with minimal fuss and bother. Most of us would have been goners right then and there, which speaks to Kudo's incredible strength and resilience. Number 3. Mauricio Molina. A pro who has played for numerous clubs throughout his career, Molina's life was almost ended during a match back in 2013 when FC Seoul squared up against opponents Busan Park. He was on the attack and jumped to make a header attempt after receiving a cross, but the opposing goalkeeper had other plans. In his attempt to knock the ball clear, he swung a wild fist through the air, connecting squarely with Molina's head and taking him down like a bag of bricks. Molina was knocked out on contact and, much like Kudo, ended up swallowing his tongue with the force of the hit. We already knew that goalkeepers were tough, but after a little review, it seems like they've got superhuman strength, with the ability to make foes swallow their own tongues for a complete and total takedown. Again, players from both sides came to his aid and were able to clear his airway before medics arrived to take over and take him to the hospital for further examination. He was obviously seriously concussed, but suffered no further injuries after the blow to the head, which marks him as yet another footballer who happened to have luck on his side. It's worth noting that footballers everywhere seem to be pretty skilled field medics, each of these incidents being followed by some incredible displays of skill and caring. What makes Molina's knockout hit home a little more for some is the fact that his 2 sons were also in attendance that day, looking forward to watching their dad play. They must have been terrified as they watched from the stands, not knowing exactly what was going on other than the fact that something very horrible had happened to their dad. Thankfully, Molina pulled through, thanks to the quick thinking of his fellow players and medics, with his kids not having to go through the pain of watching their dad die in front of their eyes, which would have been horrible to say the least. Molina ended up getting back to the game after some time to recover and ended up doing just as well as he previously did, despite his harrowing ordeal and subsequent setback. This is yet another example of just how tough footballers really are, with some being able to take hits that some American football players couldn't. Number 2. Shane Duffy. Shane's career is still going strong, although his prospects were seriously limited after what seemed like a routine accident on the field almost led to him bleeding out in front of everyone present without even realizing it. The incident occurred during a training match while he was preparing to represent Ireland by joining their national team. During a routine play, he ended up in a routine collision, which happens all the time in football. With players constantly vying for possession and trying to knock each other off the ball, and with so much at stake during almost every match they play, bumps and bruises are all in a day's work, with any malicious attempts to cause harm being caught and punished by the referee. Even accidental hits that cross the line end up being flagged if they're suspicious, with this one particular hit not being spectacular in the least. During training, the players involved wouldn't even really be opponents, leaving no reason to be overly rough. The hit didn't end up with any red flags raised, except when Duffy stopped to address the rest of the team and complained about a particular set of symptoms. He told those present that his stomach hurt and he couldn't figure out why. He was taken to his team surgeon, who immediately recognized that he needed very serious medical attention. He was rushed to the hospital, where it was confirmed that Duffy had ended up with a lacerated liver after the hit and was slowly bleeding out internally, which is fatal if not treated. Surgeons were able to eventually stop the bleeding and save Duffy's life. Shane has continued to play football professionally and has said that his freak injury won't discourage him in the future. He even recently represented Ireland in the EUFA Euro Cup in 2016, finally fulfilling the goal he set out 6 years earlier to fulfill. Shane is yet another footballer who overcame some serious odds after a life-threatening injury and continued to excel in his chosen sport. That kind of dedication is certainly worth looking up to, and we wish Shane all the best in his career from here on out. Number 1. Fabrice Muamba. Fabrice was playing for Bolton in the quarterfinals of the 2012 FA Cup when he suddenly dropped on the pitch mid-game. Play was stopped for over an hour while medics tried desperately to revive him. He was given CPR and assisted oxygen, and had to be given 2 shocks with a defibrillator while laying motionless on the pitch. It was later determined that he suffered from a massive heart attack, and medics who were on the scene later confirmed that his heart stopped for a full 78 minutes before he was finally brought back from the brink. Muamba was also given a further 12 defibrillator shocks by EMTs while en route to the hospital after being removed from the field. He only recovered consciousness the next day after a night filled with tense anticipation. Fans were probably relieved to hear that he hadn't died right in front of them. Unlike the rest of the players on our list, probably because of the nature of his injury, he retired from football and never played another professional match again. He's currently still going strong and is a journalist, which enables him to interact with former colleagues and still immerse himself in the game from time to time. While we don't expect footballers to have their hearts give out in the middle of the game, with us seeing them as being in peak physical condition, heart attacks do occur on football pitches more than you might expect, with the majority of players who suffer from them being African. We don't know what this means just yet, but there's a growing trend that has many people worried. We're just glad that Muamba wasn't a part of those statistics, and are glad that he managed to pull through after such a close brush with death. While Muamba's wasn't due to a collision like our other list items, it's probably the most disturbing because he was the only player to actually be declared dead for a full 78 minutes. Hopefully he's taking better care of himself these days and spending more time relaxing instead of pushing his heart to the point of collapse in the pursuit of an FA Cup championship win. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. done pretty well for himself. He's put out a lot of TV shows and has built himself into somewhat of a household name. He's known for a lot of pretty crazy tricks that manage to amaze his spectators and TV audiences, although there are actually quite a few camera tricks utilized in his pre-recorded shows, to be sure. That being said, he wouldn't have lasted long if he couldn't still pull it off and put on a live show that leaves onlookers dumbfounded. With a good repertoire to pull from, we decided to focus on one of his most iconic tricks and prove that it's not all that difficult to pull off yourself. Your new bar trick, of course, is Criss Angel's levitation trick. The most basic version of this trick is incredibly simple and something that anyone could realistically pull off. Basically, he uses a fake leg with some straightforward misdirection. He uses pants that allow him to hook the fake leg up to his other one while he puts his now free foot onto an elevated surface. Not so impressive now, huh? Criss uses a lot of time to build up the suspense of the act and uses his spectators' gullibility to his advantage. If you get the angle right and ensure that nobody looks too closely, you're good to go. The more advanced version of this trick, however, involves more than a spare shoe, a stick, and a pair of fancy pants. It's the one where he hovers dozens of feet in the air above amazed spectators viewing him from below. The entire thing is, of course, captured on video from both buildings and the street, offering views that clearly show that he isn't being suspended by anything other than the power of magic. This relies on cables, camera angles, and some carefully placed crisp $100 bills. We can be sure that Mr. Angel isn't a tightrope walker, although we would be far more impressed with him if he were to take that route. What is more probable of an outcome is that he hooked himself up to a crane or some kind of scaffolding, with the adorning spectators below being little more than paid actors or lucky passerby who have signed a confidentiality agreement, along with cashing in on those aforementioned Benjamins. At least he's not currently in the middle of a vicious lawsuit based on one of his tricks, like the next big name on our list. Number 4. David Copperfield. If you haven't heard about David Copperfield, then you definitely missed his big scandal back in 2013, and we're here to catch you up. While the injury of an audience member isn't the way we'd like to get the inside scoop on one of his biggest tricks, we're certainly gonna run with it. That being said, we do wish Gavin Cox and his family all the best and hope that he's able to make an eventual recovery from his terrible onstage injury. At the very least, we think Copperfield should step up and take ownership for his mistake and agree that his people were far too rough with bewildered and innocent participants who had no clue what was happening to them ahead of time. At this point, given the circumstances, compensation wouldn't hurt either. The ongoing court case centers on Copperfield's disappearing audience trick, which led to Mr. Cox sustaining permanent brain damage when he was trampled on stage during a live show. Copperfield starts the show by tossing 13 inflatable balls into the audience. Once his 13 lucky contestants are called on stage, they're shuffled into a cage of all things, and each given a high-powered flashlight to shine directly at the rest of the crowd. At about this point, David's own stage lights get cranked up a notch and help to completely dazzle the rest of the audience, who remain blissfully unaware of the pandemonium happening above them as the cage is then covered with an enormous blanket. We don't know about you, but we think adding a cover just kills the trick right there. If he could manage to scurry his caged quarry out through the secret passageway located at the back of the cage while they kept their lights trained on the audience, we'd probably be impressed, but adding flashlights for show while covering the cage anyway isn't necessary. Once through the passageway, his chosen guinea pigs are meant to line up on stage, revealing an empty cage and smiling fans. Problem is that there's just no oversight, and it's downright dangerous to create a mad dash for the exit in a suspended death trap. Maybe he can pull off the greatest trick of his career and make this lawsuit go away, but we doubt he's anywhere near that good. The comment from Copperfield's people so far? The history of the show speaks for itself. We deny all allegations. Unfortunately, we cannot comment further due to ongoing litigation. Sure, guys. Number 3. Houdini. You knew it was coming, and we really couldn't let you down. There's no way we could put together a lineup of famous magicians and not include Houdini, after all. His name is a household one all across the world, and just about everyone knows and loves his most popular acts. His tragic death, the result of a regular trick of his gone awry, helped to cement his name as a performer who literally lived and died by his trade. but we're choosing to focus on one of his earlier acts. This simple trick helped put him on the map and skyrocket him to celebritydom. We're talking about Houdini's famed metamorphosis trick, first performed by the man in 1894. While this was a play on a trick that he had done before, Houdini made it his own by using his own wife in the act. It became a sensation and helped transform how people saw magicians. Binding his hands and sealing himself in a knotted sack, Houdini was then placed in a chest which was itself locked and sealed shut. The entirety of this was then placed, Houdini, sack, chest and all, inside a cupboard with a curtain drawn across the front. His wife, Bessie, would then step into the cupboard, close the curtain, and clap 3 times. Upon the 3rd clap, the curtain would snap open, revealing Houdini, who would then demonstrate that he and his wife had exchanged places, with her hands bound in the same sack, bearing the same knot, in the same chest, still locked up and sealed tight. This intricate trick was the one that caught the attention of the Welsh Brothers Circus, who quickly snapped up the pair and brought them on tour in 1895. The secret to this remarkable trick is actually quite simple, given the seeming complexity of the overall act. First of all, his hands were bound by a knot that was simple to escape from. Once he was in the sack, he quickly loosed his hands. The rope binding the sack itself was actually fed inside, allowing Houdini to loosen it with a swift tug as the chest, complete with an escape hatch in the back, was initially being locked. As soon as the curtain was closed, Houdini popped out and clapped his hands while letting the audience think that the phantom claps came from Bessie, who would already be wriggling into the sack, which was then pushed right back through the escape hatch. While all this seems straightforward, the real trick is getting the timing right, which would have taken an immense amount of practice. What impressed people most was the speed at which the husband and wife duo carried out the trick. Being a husband and wife duo also presumably helped endear themselves to the crowds a little too. Number 2, David Blaine. We know he's creepy as sin, but it's undeniable that David Blaine has a great stage presence. Leaning on a bit of an unnecessary but still relatively light goth/overgrown scene kid vibe, Blaine likes to dazzle sidewalk audiences with impressive sleights of hand and astounding card tricks. Sleight of hand is a staple of every card junkie, petty thief, and high school entertainer, but he does a better job at it than most. What we think is somewhat underrated is how he further applied his skills to a standard deck of 52 playing cards. It really does take a lot of work to be as casual as Blaine seems to be, and we think that David's shrinking deck trick is definitely worth a breakdown. The trick begins with forcing his chosen audience member to pick an innocuous black card. After this forced card is picked, using any number of established and well-known methods, he has them reveal it, then place it back in the deck. Blaine snaps the back, instantly shrinking the deck and revealing that all the black cards have been removed except for the one the audience member chose. To pull this off, he only uses 27 cards instead of 52 to begin with, holding them carefully while applying pressure briefly to help fan the cards out and makes the deck look full. Once the only black card initially present is placed in the seemingly full deck, he simply layers them all together again to reveal the supposedly diminished card count. Number 1, Nigel Harrison. Coming in at number 1, we couldn't help ourselves and had to include an homage to everybody's favorite TV magician. Illusionist. You know how the Alliance of Magicians rolls. Job might not impress anyone other than his brother Buster, but he does make some solid half-hearted attempts to get some laughs out of his audience. We wanted to bring one of his most iconic tricks back into the real world and offer up an actual example of the time that Nigel Harrison made an actual boat disappear. In the trick, the video of which is available online, he's followed by a cameraman as he finishes his preparations. Featuring a massive ferry from Ontario's Gananoque boat line and a group of blindfolded participants on board, this rain-soaked video is a great example of showmanship. Nigel starts by explaining that the footage is unedited and shot in a single take. As the cameraman follows him around, he runs back and forth to check that the lines are secure and then scampers up the bank away from the boat. Up there, we have a couple of guys waiting with an empty picture frame, which is then centered and covered. Nigel then uncovers the frame, revealing that the boat has vanished. With certain lighting and optical effects, along with good old-fashioned misdirection, he manages to completely hide the boat from the camera's view, even dashing back to the dock after he finishes his big reveal to show that it is in fact gone. At least, that's what he wants you to believe. Dimming certain lights while raising others above the top of the boat helps to obscure the area just enough to cover the boat in darkness. While we're not sure exactly what material he used, we know that he managed to pull the boat off just far enough off the dock to avoid the stage light's glare and covered it with a large light-absorbing screen with his, wait for it, 40-plus person crew. Pulling the boat off the dock would be as easy as installing pulleys or using a smaller craft on the far side. We expected it was both. If we had a group like that to do our bidding, we're sure we could pull off some pretty spectacular stunts, especially if they aren't actually done live. Kudos does go out to Nigel because while we're pretty sure we've got him figured out, we still haven't been able to pull all the pieces together just yet. If you have any further insight into this disappearing boat act, feel free to add it to the discussion below. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. The world has some incredible creatures that pose very unique challenges for hunters. Whatever your views on hunting, it goes without saying that it's a dangerous sport. A lot can go wrong, especially when dealing with unpredictable animals, and these 5 shocking moments caught on camera while hunting. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Chimp with AK. It seems to be legitimate and is downright terrifying or absolutely hilarious depending on your point of view. This video has been watched countless times and is still a classic. It features a group of West African soldiers hanging out and having some fun while they sit in a circle. They're all engaging with a chimp who stumbled into their midst, checking in on what all the fuss is about. It seems that one of the guys has the bright idea to give a rifle to the chimp and see how it handles the weapon. He tells his friend, who quickly decides that he's onto something. He happily hands his weapon over while everyone laughs and continues to have one hell of a good time. The chimp takes the weapon, an AK, complete with a loaded magazine, and brandishes it the same way the soldiers do. They get a real kick out of this, with one of the guys pretending to unload his own weapon towards the chimp, shifting the muzzle back and forth in a spraying motion. After the joke wears off, the chimp decides to shoulder the rifle and begin mimicking the soldiers, moving the muzzle of its own weapon from side to side. The guys then begin to get a little uneasy, with all of them now on their feet and getting ready to run for cover. It seems they realized a little too late that the rifle was loaded with its safety off when it was handed over. Knowing that it has these guys beat, then proceeds to pull the trigger and release a volley that continues as the entire group of soldiers run for their lives. The guy with the camera drops behind a barrel and trains it back on the chimp, revealing the victor standing on its own with the rifle still clutched in its hands. It circles around, taking in its surroundings and all the mayhem it caused, before raising the rifle above its head in a hilarious display of bravado. Seems we're not so different from our chimp relatives after all, with this group of soldiers now knowing exactly why you shouldn't give one a loaded, fully automatic rifle. It's a miracle that nobody was hurt, although we're sure this isn't the only time this has happened. The fact that the footage does seem to be from 20th Century Fox's research library does make us think that it could possibly be staged, but a thorough review of the video hasn't revealed anything to make us overly suspicious, except for the fact that the cameraman is stupidly brave. If this is a hoax, it's a pretty good one, and we have to say that it really made our day. The soldiers might beg to disagree, but we can assume that if this incident was real, they were able to laugh about it later once the smoke had settled. Number 4. Bow Hunter. This big game hunter probably should have taken more than a bow with him when he decided to take on a lioness in Africa. Then again, he's a pretty good shot and probably knew what he was doing. His buddy hanging out with a rifle to take the angry predator down is a solid call when it comes to having a proper defense, but we think that trying to take down a lion with a bow only to have it charge you with no signs of any real injury isn't much of a win in the greater scheme of things. We get that bow hunters like to take on big game, but when they put themselves in harm's way like that, we'd expect them to be good enough to not need to use those guns. It just seems like cheating. We say that if you can't take the lion out with an arrow, then the lion gets to take you out instead. It would definitely add an extra element to the sport, and also make it a lot more sportsmanlike in the process. At the end of the day, if you need a rifle, just use a rifle. If you really want to use both, by all means, use both, but we say you've got to carry and use both weapons yourself instead of copping out and bringing Daryl along with you as a spotter. These guys really had all the advantages here, which makes their trophy less impressive, with their outing being, in our minds, a glorified day of mudding and tailgating. Maybe we're being a little harsh here. It does look like the hunters were skilled, and we do have to applaud Buddy for landing that arrow, but nobody should really expect to down a lion with a bow without getting more than a few stitches in the process. That being said, we'd be frozen in fear if we were in the same situation, with an angry predator sprinting in our direction. These guys stayed cool, calm, and collected throughout, which earns them spot number 4 on today's countdown. Number 3, Buffalo won't stay down. When you go hunting buffalo, it takes a lot to bring them down and keep them down for good. These hunters learned just how fearsome a wounded animal can be when they approached a buffalo they thought was too wounded to fight back. They approach cautiously, not wanting to get too close, with the group probably being aware of the danger they're in ahead of time. That doesn't make what happened next any less surprising or terrifying, however, as the buffalo still has enough energy in it to make their day a complete nightmare. The animal is lying there, wounded and confused, not knowing what hit it. As it looks around, it turns towards the group of hunters who are slowly creeping closer, realizing that they're coming to take it out. The buffalo decides it isn't ready to go down without a fight, turning with surprising speed despite its incredible size and standing with a grunt to make a last-ditch effort to save its own life, charging with reckless abandon. The hunter takes a shot, which doesn't faze the beast at all, and then another. After a couple of hits like that, you'd expect the buffalo would drop, but it just keeps charging, going down only a foot or two away from the lead hunter. If the third shot hadn't fully taken the buffalo down, 1 at long range and 2 up close, he almost certainly would have been impaled, trampled. Being immersed in nature can be a wonderfully relaxing. Slender Man is an urban legend featuring a tall, lanky figure wearing a suit. Another main component of the Slender Man getup is a blank white face. Said to prey on children, it's quite the horror story. These 5 Slendermen caught on camera and spotted in real life range from photoshopped fails to creepy pics that could be the real deal. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Playground sighting. People do love the Slender Man myth, and the internet is filled with awkward photos like this one. Photoshop features heavily in many of them, and we wouldn't be surprised if that was the case here. The scene seems like a standard one from the late 1900s. A group of children are playing during a beautiful day, with one stopping to pose as she climbs up a slide. It looks like the picture's all fun and games, until you look towards the shaded area, underneath the trees. It seems the playground has an adult surrounded by a group of kids who seem to be sitting down looking at the adult figure. One is standing up, looking a little unsteady directly in front of the woman, with none of the shaded kids interacting with one another. They're all staring at the figure, which, upon closer inspection, has an odd look. They seem to be tall and slender, which fits the bill for the Slender Man. You can't make out their face, but it does seem pretty featureless, adding to the terror. It's when you realize that the figure has no arms, but long, shadowy tentacles flowing from each arm that you realize what's going on here. Other than a poor Photoshop attempt, of course. It seems the editor wanted us to think that the Slender Man was indeed watching over these kids, true to the myth. If this was the case, it would be incredibly creepy. That entire playground would be done. Although it's interesting to note that the adult who we assume took the photo in the first place sees nothing amiss. Correct us if we're wrong, but we'd assumed that one glance to the left would be all that was needed to realize the kids were in trouble. But this parent seems unfazed. It could be that the picture was taken before they noticed the oddity, but we're willing to bet that the original pic featured nothing more than a really tall, lanky adult partially obscured by shadow. Add a little blur and maybe some blending techniques, and you've got yourself a Slender Man. This photo wasn't well done. Stretching the figure up a little was all that was needed to make a convincing Slender Man. We're sure that the original photo was probably creepy enough without the alterations to stir people's imaginations. Think about it. Some guy standing around a group of children all staring in his direction? That's serial killer type stuff right there. The awkward arms just killed it for us, as it doesn't take ghost arms to make a Slender Man. It just ruins the moment. Oh well. With not much that can be done about this fail, we're moving on to a photo that definitely isn't edited and may hold some dark secrets lurking in the background. Number 4. Playground gets weird. So, it looks like Slender Man loves playgrounds. It makes sense, really. He preys on kids, and all creeps know that a playground's a good guess. Another shot with a group of kids hanging out on a slide in the foreground, but this one has other adults standing around watching things happen. Directly across from the group of adults is something that's seriously sinister. Standing under the covered area, next to a support beam, is an eerie sight. It looks like a very tall person wearing a suit complete with a tie is standing there watching the group. If you look down, it seems like he has no feet, but that's not too outlandish for a Slender Man photo. The other picture had crazy tentacle arms after all. It also looks like his face is missing, replaced with a Slender Man-esque white mask. That's the really weird part. That, and it looks like it's cold, and the guy, if he's really there, isn't wearing much to protect himself from the elements. A suit really isn't cut out for winter weather. If Slender Man happened to be real, this could very easily be a perfect sighting. The eerie, humanoid figure just staring whimsically at a group of children playing in a park. The adults here are standing guard, but you get the sense the Slender Man is just biding his time. The woods featuring in the background make a perfect backdrop for the scene, leading you to think that he snuck in through the trees and can easily slink back out again, completely unnoticed. Unnoticed until this picture was developed, of course. The fact that the kid on the slide has the same creepy white face as the guy does is just, Is he a Slender Man spy, adding more to the mystery? We figure the conditions were off. There's a little blur in the photo to begin with, and the shot might not have been developed properly. Only one face out of the 3 kids looking toward the camera has a clear face in the photo after all, and the guy in the background could have been affected too, especially because he's further away and partially obscured. We think he's probably just an odd arrangement of trees and shadow, but if we're wrong, this photograph is seriously dark. If those kids are targets, there's no way they're going to be able to resist the Slender Man, who does seem to be observing the entire group rather intently. Number 3. Guiding the Way. Picture number 3 is another photo that looks genuine, although it does leave a lot of questions unanswered. First of all, who's this kid in the front of the picture, and why does he look so pissed off? This kid really doesn't like whatever outing these kids seem to be on. This photo was posted anonymously with no indication as to where it was taken, but it does look relatively old based on the style of dress. The lightly flared pants on the kid in the front with a tucked-in t-shirt and no belt to boot says it all. It's also unclear who took this photo. Could be that angry kid just doesn't like the photographer that much. In the background, however, is a figure that led the poster to believe that this pic was Slender Man worthy. In the middle of the shot, above the group of kids, is a strange figure that looks like a tall person following him. You can't make out any facial features other than a round mannequin-looking shape. The figure even looks like it's holding its right hand out in front of it as it follows the procession. One kid even seems aware of the ghostly apparition, looking over in that direction, although it's unclear if they're looking directly at the figure or just behind it. We can't figure out if it's a person who just wasn't all that photogenic or if it's something else entirely. It definitely looks ominous and very much like Slender Man shepherding a group of kids. These older photographs are notoriously tricky to get right, with many being thrown off by lighting, environmental conditions, or just a shoddy developing process. So many of these old photos seem to hold mysterious secrets, mostly because they're just not that good. Grainy photos let your imagination run rampant, with your brain processing things wrong based on a perceived sense that it's missing information and trying to compensate. That being said, this photo does have some sinister elements, and without being able to verify where it came from, we have to allow for the fact that this could actually be a real-life Slender Man sighting. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, after all. We know that line's been played out a lot lately, but it does ring true in so many situations, so it can't be too much of a stretch to apply here, can it? Once we have tangible evidence, we might recant, but for now, these Slender Man photos seem to be lacking anything concrete. Number 2. Hide and Seek. Taken in the forest by a group of kids messing around one day, this photo proves the Slender Man has made his way to Asia and set up shop there as well. While posing for a photo op, it seems that this girl was unaware of a spooky visitor playing hide and seek with her. She's on the right of the picture, with her peeping Tom peering out from behind a tree to the left. This is, on first glance, pretty creepy. The tall, lanky figure looks a lot like the Slender Man of myth, and the blurry features around the face seems to fit the bill. The wooded area itself looks quite peaceful, and we're sure it was just that on the day the picture was taken, with no mythical creatures to disrupt the mood. Another Photoshop fail. It looks like this editor didn't even try. The face is far too blurry, without any definition between it and the area behind, leading us to believe that whoever put this together is new to photo edits or just wanted to make a few friends laugh with a hastily thrown together redo. We do like how they got the legs and waist down pat, but that arm is obviously just a round paintbrush at work. The rounded stump of a wrist shows that no touch-ups were done past getting the general shape of an arm. We're also pretty sure that even a legendary creature, such as the Slender Man, once arrived, has to obey at least some of the rules of physics. Why, for example, would he hide behind a tree if he can disappear on command? We're referring, of course, to the fact that the tree is far too narrow to conceal him properly. That being the case, both shoulders would be showing on either side of the tree, unless he can turn invisible, which we don't think he can. As a Photoshop edit, it's a good first attempt, but we think more care should be put into trying to convince the world. Number 1. Creepy kids in logging camp. We don't know for sure, but this definitely looks like the area surrounding a logging camp. The photo was taken a long time ago, and we can't help but think it's creepy as sin. Those kids, no hint of a smile on their faces, seem to be possessed, staring into the distance past the camera. That 1,000-year stare isn't supposed to be something the kids do. Whatever they saw prior to this picture, it was definitely dark. The kids sitting off on their own even further back is even more terror-inducing, and we can't even begin to imagine what kind of horrors these kids must get up to in their spare time. The scene itself is dreary and bleak. As you pan left, you get the sense that there's not much hope to speak of in this landscape. Then, you see him. The Slender Man on the right side of the picture, standing just behind one of the last trees still standing among the destruction. He's just standing there, staring toward the photographer, seemingly taking in the entire scene. We don't know if he already got to these kids, but based on the looks of them, we think it's a solid bet. We're sure that nobody was actually standing there being super creepy when this photo was taken, but it looks really impressive. We can't say if this was another optical illusion or Photoshop, but if it was the latter, we've got to tip our hats to whoever pulled it off, because this isn't all that bad. If, however, these kids were visited by something mysterious and evil, we do have pretty good proof in this picture. This photo will, no matter what, probably make sleeping a pretty hard thing to do tonight. If only because those kids are so damn freaky looking. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. The animal kingdom is a terrifying place, filled with predators that can take you out in a heartbeat. While we're smarter than the average bear, we're definitely not up to take the vast majority on without proper protection. Our second installment of the 5 scariest creatures caught on camera and spotted in real life will make you think twice before heading out into wild territory without backup. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Elephant Rampage. Witnessing this rampage would definitely be a harrowing experience. An elephant is no small opponent, and this one seems seriously pissed off. This specimen was one of 3 tourist elephants who were allowed to hang out and take a quick bath in a crowded tourist town in Denmark. After their handlers decided they'd gotten their fill and decided to head back home, the elephants started to get a little anxious. It turns out that they had other plans in mind, which involved sticking around and enjoying the sunshine, at least for just a little bit longer. Not about to let their handlers push them around, they started throwing their own impressive weight around, showing everyone that they are firmly in charge. Stomping around and having a tantrum, the elephants don't seem to care who's in the way, with one almost sidestepping into a pair of baby carriages, which are quickly swept off to safety. Everything seems like it's calmed down after a few minutes, with the elephants trotting back to their enclosure. That's when some dude who's been tailing the trio the entire way back starts brandishing a crowbar threateningly. One of the beasts turns around and sees this, deciding enough is enough. After the guy takes a swing that possibly lands on the elephant's trunk, it charges the guy and then takes out a car in between him and his target. The car, as expected, is basically tossed around like a toy, with the elephant lifting most of it clear off the ground before dropping it again, making it clear that he's pissed. It then starts pushing the car up the hill towards the guy with the crowbar, not content to let him walk away just yet. That's when the other two animals catch on to what's going on and come charging back to lend a hand. The dude chills out at this point, realizing he's done. Order is finally restored, but the car ended up totaled, and we know the crowbar guy was terrified for a second there. To be honest, that's probably expected when you smack something as massive as an elephant, but you're bound to find jerks everywhere. We hope he wasn't a regular circus employee and was just a jackass bystander who got a little too hyped. Despite the event, the elephants were able to get back to their routine that evening, performing for people once again. Number 4. Hippo chases boat. When you're in a tin boat on a river in Africa and you see these telltale ripples coming up behind you, hitting the gas is probably a good call. These beasts are gigantic and are known to have a pretty nasty temperament. They attack people routinely and kill large amounts of people every single year, marking them as one of the deadliest animals in Africa. That's a pretty bold statement, but the hippo lives up to the title perfectly. While not a meat eater, it will viciously attack anything coming into its territory, with even lions and other hardcore predators giving them a very wide berth at all times. They also seem to get really pissed off by the sound of boat engines, especially outboards. It's expected that, much like many crocs, the male hippos hear the engine and assume it's another rival male coming to take him on, kicking into attack mode pretty quickly. Now, if you didn't know what these ripples were, we're sure you'd still be terrified. No matter what's lurking just under the surface, it's clear from this video that it's stalking you and is huge. This wouldn't be the time to freeze with fear, as every second is incredibly important. Hippos are at home in the water, moving faster than you'd expect. Even on the land, they have an impressive speed, easily outrunning a human. In the water, even boats aren't fast enough to power away sometimes, with many getting rammed and the occupant being mauled to death. You can actually hear the panic rise in the captain as the engine slowly gets kicked up more and more. It's evident that he wasn't expecting his attacker to be so quick. Suddenly, mere inches from the side of the boat, a monstrous shape pops up and reveals a giant hippo, at least half the size of the boat, leaping out of the water towards them. The tiny engine just managed to propel the boat out of the danger zone, but that was definitely a seriously close call. We're sure the guys on that boat won't be messing around and taking chances with hippos again anytime soon, especially after witnessing their immense power and aggression firsthand and at such close quarters. Number 3. Leopard terrorizes village. This sneaky and terrifyingly aggressive cat strolled into Chandrapur, India one day and decided to settle in for a bit. This understandably upset the locals in the area, as the cat spent its time in their neighborhood indiscriminately attacking anyone nearby. Villagers followed the animal at a safe distance to make sure it didn't escape while they called the authorities. We don't know about you, but if we were those villagers, we would have been locked up tight at the first sign of a leopard on the loose, but these people have some real guts. Could be more of a community spirit, but it also could have just been an exciting time in an otherwise boring area. We don't know, but that's not the point. After teams came in, armed with rifles and tranquilizer guns, the cat ends up trapped in a building. With people all around, there's nowhere for the leopard to escape. Teams rushed inside to catch the cat, which then promptly decided it had better go find somewhere else to go. With all the ground exits covered by strange people with guns, the cat capitalized on the next best exit, which was a hole in the roof tiles. Getting all the way up there must have been an impressive feat, but we are talking about a leopard here. They're pretty damn nimble, as these people soon found out. The cat found out too late that there were people waiting on the roof, expecting this move, so it, rather expectedly, lashed out and took them down. After making its way outside, the leopard then realized it was boxed in on all sides and decided screw it, before taking its attackers on in a brutal display of speed and power. It begins to leap all over the place, back and forth, sending groups of people armed with whatever they could find scurrying for cover. It then heads back down to street level, trotting around like the ordeal was no biggie. It gets trapped by a guy with a sheet of corrugated metal, which would be great if it wasn't for the terrified people at the other end of the alleyway. Luckily, the leopard ends up in what seems to be a local toilet, hiding itself and staring out at its attackers, waiting for capture. We're pretty sure this leopard was let go far away from the village, or any others for that matter. The day could have ended a lot worse, with people potentially being mauled to death. A scared, trapped animal wandering through a village can easily cause some serious damage, and we're just thankful nobody got seriously injured by the wayward leopard. Number 2. Rhino charging SUV. When you head out to Etosha National Park in Namibia, remember to stay out of the way of rhinos. We're not sure what set this monster off, but we assume that the SUV in question might have looked like a rival rhino. It takes a massive run up at the car, which is basically stuck helpless with the occupants too shocked to know what to do. You see the car back up a little as the driver tries to get out of the way, but the rhino at this point is locked on. It takes another few butts at the side of the SUV, showing it who's boss. The really big hit, however, is definitely that first one. The rhino has all that momentum built up from an impressive run-up, building speed the entire way. The animal is clearly the same size as the car and is ready to do some damage no matter what. We're surprised that both the SUV and rhino both seem to remain relatively unscathed, although everyone involved was probably rightfully shocked, including the rhino. The way its horn crumples against that door has gotta hurt a little. It doesn't seem to care, but realizes very quickly that cars don't make good target practice. We expect that beautiful white SUV was probably a rental, and we really hope that guy got insurance. Then again, we can't really say whether or not rhino attacks are covered by rental insurance in Namibia. Our guess is probably not, but you never know. We like how the people in the front car made a point of staying super quiet, dropping the camera right as the rhino stops to take in its surroundings. The video cuts here, and we expect that the driver in the front car decided it was every man for himself and took off. That animal definitely didn't look like it was ready to stop just yet, and still looked riled up enough to take on a second car just for good measure. It's not worth taking that chance, no matter what. Rental insurance or not, a rhino attack's gonna end up being a rough day for everyone, especially whoever's in charge of putting the pedal to the metal and keeping the rest of the crew safe. Number 1. Tiger attacks woman. Another park to avoid is this one located in Beijing. This one looks like it would be a little more tame than the one we saw in Namibia with its paved streets and lightly wooded areas. This is definitely a good place to hang out with the family if you're out on a picnic. It's obvious that the people in this video thought the same thing when they stopped to get out and take in their surroundings. It looks like the woman gets out to switch places with her companion, who ends up having a bit of trouble, taking his time getting out of the vehicle. The people behind them are obviously waiting to pass, and we're sure they had no idea what was lurking just off camera either. Turns out the guy was hesitant to get out of the car because a tiger was taking in the entire scene the whole time, waiting for the right opportunity. Deciding that he's happy with his apparent prize, the tiger swoops in from the woods, snatches the woman around the waist, and begins to drag her back out of view. This is when the guy in front gets out super quick and starts to run after the woman, now firmly in the tiger's grip. He appears to hesitate for a second before darting off screen and then running back. Another woman then gets out of the car, obviously hysterical, as he tries to tell her to stay inside with the door closed. They both then take off out of the CCTV camera's view with what seems to be a park emergency response vehicle. The other two cars stay motionless with nobody willing to get out and help. We doubt we'd do much either. Let's be fair, there's not much to be done once a tiger snatches someone and drags her off. Better to let the park staff handle that fiasco. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Many people see the Bloody Mary fad as nothing more than an urban legend. Others, however, have taken it upon themselves to test the theory out and film the results. These 5 Bloody Mary sightings caught on camera and spotted in real life are certainly entertaining, and we think that they're absolutely perfect for today's countdown. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Big Sister Sub-In. This kid is all set to prove that Bloody Mary isn't real once and for all. He seems like a skeptical little kid, but still down to try things out, if only for the sake of science. His friends are happy to egg him on, and they're all quite excited to see what happens. They have a go at a first run through, turning the lights off and filming themselves repeating Bloody Mary 3 times in the bathroom. They wait for a bit, with nothing strange happening at all, then